Welcome to another episode of the Loadout Music Podcast, featuring in-depth interviews with a wide range of music personalities, from rock and roll Hall of Famers to Grammy winners and today's rising stars. Recorded from the Old Rock House in St. Louis, Missouri, here's your host, Aaron Perlott.
Welcome back to the Loadout Music Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Perlott. Today we welcome a band that's been around for more than 30 years. Along with Phish and Widespread Panic, the band Mo is considered one of the great American jam bands that's been praised for the musicality. Mo has appeared at Woodstock 99, opened for the Allman Brothers, The Who, performed at Radio City Music Hall, and at Bonnaroo. We're thrilled to welcome two of the band's members, Al Schnier and Vinnie Amico. Guys, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So I have to start with this. I read a quote from your bassist, Rob. It said, it was talking about kind of how the band ultimately got formed. And I thought this was great. He said, we like music, we like to party, and we wanted to put those two things together. that seems like a pretty foundational thesis to put in a band together, huh?
Pretty much. I mean, you know, I've often likened it to like bowling with your buddies.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that we always have done, and we've done it for years, and I think we did it for a long time before we realized that it was the thing that we do, because it was just what we did in our spare time. But instead of bowling, we happen to, pick up instruments and sit around and drink and play. And that's how we spent our free time.
That even predates Mo for me, like back in high school. That's
what I mean. Like,
I don't
I've been
know,
doing that since
15,
I was a kid.
16 years old. Yeah.
Right.
You got together with your buddies, you smoked some weed and drank beers, and you just started to play. And then you started to get good at it. And then it's like, wasn't a viable career path until it was.
Right. I mean, I recall, like, on school nights, there was this one particular group that I would play with when I think I was in 8th grade at the time, and most of these other kids were in high school. They were much older than me, and we would put an entire band in my friend's bedroom. And it was a small bedroom. It was big enough for a double bed, and that was it. And there was probably 6 or 7 of us in there with a drum set and a bass rig and a couple of guitars and a bunch of us all in there, and everybody's smoking and drinking or whatever. I'm in 8th grade, and I thought, this is the greatest thing ever. I was like, I've made it. I'm hanging out with seniors, and I'm partying on a Tuesday night, and learning how to play Ripple and play it like 8 times. Like, this is great.
Well, it's kind of like me with alcohol. I just started real young. And then, until I realized I was an alcoholic and had to quit, but it's just something I did. It just became part of my ethos.
I'm still there with you, except for I haven't quit yet.
Well, some of us needed to more than others,
Right.
What is it about? You go to a jam band show, and I've been to so many dead shows. I can't count on 2 hands, but there's something so different about the experience of artists like Mo, that people get so entranced in the music itself. And it is very different. I mean, there's this thing where you're creating a very organic thing that just seems, it's a different art form than, say, like a traditional rock and roll band. What is that?
I mean, I think the fact that you're playing live improvisational music is the thing.
Yeah.
And certainly there's it's spun out into this whole genre of music that that stems largely from the Dead and the Allmans and their various family trees. However, it happens in other settings as well. I mean, I just saw Wilco the other night, And it's because they've become such a great live band, and the live music experience of seeing a band like Wilco that also stretches out their songs, and they have those moments. You know the fans are there for it, and you've sort of set this. You set the table where you're saying, okay, we're gonna play without rules for a little while, and we know that you're okay with that, and you want us to take the chances, and something interesting may or may not happen here, and we're all here along for the ride, and that's part of it. It's like seeing a live sporting event. Like, you kind of know what the parameters are, but you don't know what the outcome's going to be.
I also think there's I play in a rock and roll band, and there's again it's a very different set of parameters that go into the show, where every musician within a band like Mo, there's so much opportunity to just kind of spread out, for lack of a better term, spread out and like demonstrate your musicianship that in kind of a traditional rock show you don't really get. And you're right, that improvisational nature, very much in kind of a jazz concept, allows you to really just kind of spread out and kind of demonstrate just kind of how each individual piece ultimately makes that great aggregate, but also you get to show that individuality at the same time.
I think too, the fan base has a lot to do with it a lot of times. Like, I hate to call it professional concert goers, but like the fans that see a lot of these bands go to a lot of shows. They go to a lot of different bands, and their minds are way more open to what they're going to see, which feeds to the band, and the band can then be a lot more open to what they play. People aren't expecting, when they go to see a jam band show, to see all the hits, and the show is going to be the same as it was last night, because the show is not going to be the same as last night, or the night before, the night before, the night before. And the band is going to, in particular in our case, are going to try our hardest to play it different than we did the night before, and to stretch and to look for, new musical pathways and all that. And like Al said before, the fans are there for it, and they're so wide open to it. Sometimes we fall on our face, or a lot of the bands will fall on their face. Fans love that as much as they do us killing something, because it just shows that we're humans and not robots. But that fan base, they're a big part of it, and they're, open to it, and it's different than, say, I don't know, somebody who goes to see, not in the fandom, but in what they're open to hear is different than, say, a band that's going to see Coldplay.
Yeah,
or a fan that's going to see Coldplay,
And I would say any, well produced, well scripted pop show like that, where maybe there's going to be choreography and backing tracks and things like that. And it may be a fantastic show, and just as much, there might be some great musicianship on display during the course of that show. And you hope from, well, that's the thing. Like, you don't know what you're going to get, and it depends on who we're talking about. But look, even a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers show, for example, was pretty well scripted. The songs didn't stretch out any longer on any given night, and they weren't any different. They stuck to their arrangements, and they were what they were. Those shows were amazing every single time, and the band, it was one of the greatest live bands ever.
Yep.
And I've never ever disappointed seeing a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers show. And it's, slightly different, but granted, like, they're a live band. They're not playing to backing tracks. There's no choreography. It's not going to be the same as seeing, just name a pop star, and
Britney Spears, which is your favorite.
Sure. Yeah. Or Katy Perry. And I bet you that Katy Perry show is freaking amazing. There's something to be said for all of that, but it's just not the kind of show that we're talking about any more than, seeing, Doc Watson play at the Bottom Line would be, it's a completely different thing. You're going for that experience in the moment, and what may or may not happen for the stories in between, for the song that will get played, and the way it will get sung differently each time, the inflections, every like Vinny said, the humanness of it.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something, Vinny, you touched on. You were talking about the differentiation from show to show, which I think is really fascinating in that, a lot of bands, if they're, they're playing a show, we were talking about the Heartbreakers there, drummer gets out of time and the whole thing can get fucked up. I know that's happened with me and our band, maybe as our rhythm guitarist, if I get off with our drummer, to me that's my click track, and I'm like, what the hell's going on here? But how do you still stay tight as you guys are doing those improvisational things? And there's a certain formula to it, to some degree, within some set of parameters you've got to stay to, and at the same time you are experimenting as you're playing. How do you walk that fine line there without the thing just turning into a train wreck?
Well, 30 years of doing it together. Basically, if you hang out with us enough, we're always finishing each other's sentences and beginning something. It's the same thing with the music. So we kind of, as much as we're doing different stuff, you hear little things, and the conversation that's happening in the 30 years of playing that, being in that conversation, you tend to, there's little idiosyncrasies that you hear. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and everybody, night to night, our ears are wide open. So we're always listening, for it, just to the music and the conversation, and we're just listening and listening. And that's the one thing over all these years, our ears have gotten very well trained. Even like if Al or me or Rob or any of us go and play some side gig, our ears are so well trained that we're able to sit into those gigs, and a lot of times tend to lead some of those gigs because of how many years we've been, and how we converse with each other on stage. And there's a production element to it, that we've all, written this music and produced it. So every night you got your producer hat on, every night you got your ears wide open, and going into the show knowing that it's open, other than the parameters, which you said, which are basically the songs. Yeah. The songs are the parameters. Everything else is pretty much open. Your ears are open, your producer hat's on, and how are we going to get from here to there, or what we're going to do. That's all happens within the 30 years of us doing this together as much as we have.
Do you ever find that to a degree, when you go see just you stumble across some other band that's more of like a traditional rock and roll band, that the degree of difficulty, I don't think people understand the degree of difficulty of how you guys play, because it's a much more elevated art form than most other music, in terms of being able to stay together and sound like it's meant to be, even though you're improvising. When you go see another run-of-the-mill band, are you ever kind of like, yeah, whatever, that's do you ever find yourself accidentally almost having kind of like that,
every time I see any other band?
It's funny. I mean, and I know that too. Like, you go to see another band, and like, I'm looking at the production, I'm counting the people, I'm thinking about, the contract and the deal they had, and I'm thinking, oh, that must have been a shitty load in, and like, I'm thinking about all of these things rather than just listening to the music. I'm just thinking about the work of the day and how it's all going. But then you start thinking about that too, and it's all the things that you said. And then to be at one of those shows, like if Vinny and I are there together, like we can't shut up. Like we're just talking about like, oh, gee, I wonder what this is. Oh, there's their stage manager and blah, blah, blah. Didn't that guy used to work for so-and-so and whatever? And like before you know it, like the set's half over and we've just been talking about the music business for this entire time. And then like also the songs, but to your point, like, yeah, you listen to it and like, I just want to let it all go and be in the moment and enjoy it. And sometimes it's hard because like you hear the crowd reacting to like this low hanging fruit and you're like, oh, come on, really? It's it's okay. They're like, people are out making music and people are enjoying it. And that's the point, really.
Yeah.
I went and saw, G Love, OAR, and Dispatch the other night.
Mhm.
And we've been friends with G for a long time, and actually ended up hanging out with him and not seeing most of the show. But I did watch a bunch of Dispatch, and they were really good. And I didn't know their music or anything, and they were really good live.
They're
Like
a very good band.
they
Yeah.
did it. Yeah, they did a lot of cool stuff that I had never seen. Well, I didn't know their songs, and I hadn't seen them, so I didn't know that they did that stuff. And it was really good. And I was psyched that I paid attention and was like,
And were able
not
to enjoy
not
yourself?
doing any preconceived, it was
Well, for
really
what
like
it's worth,
everything they did I was digging. So
that's good. For what it's
yeah.
worth, OAR is also a really good band.
Yeah, I know, I've seen them a bunch of times. I just, by then we had gone to G Love's bus and we're just hanging out, and
Yeah.
Yeah, I love G Love and Special Sauce. It's such another guy who's really kind of carved a very unique niche for himself. That I don't think gets the credit that he's really due. But anyone who's ever seen his show live always walks away incredibly impressed with performance.
Yeah, he's a good dude too.
Yeah, and hardworking dude. I mean,
hard work.
he plays almost every day of the week.
Wow. So you guys, I guess it was like 89 roughly. You guys met in and around Buffalo. You were in college there at the time?
Al was in Oneonta.
And so how does the band come together? I imagine you guys were all playing music with different people at the time, and do you guys just end up jamming together and you're like, well, this shit sounds good, we need to be more formal about this? Or how does that happen?
I mean, that's largely it. It started in bits and pieces. So Rob and Chuck started doing exactly that, playing together when they met in a dorm. And I think Chuck literally was teaching Rob how to play at that point.
Right.
And it was part of their early friendship, but also, again, like just what they did when they were hanging out, drinking beers and playing guitars. And it turned into what became sort of the early formation of Mo.
It was originally five. It was called Five Guys in Mo, right? That was the original.
Five Guys named
Mo.
Five Guys. Okay.
Yeah, Five Guys Named Mo, named after, there's a Louis Jordan song from the 1930s, which Joe Jackson covered on his Jump and Jive record. And that was sort of the beginning of the band, but it was really, they were playing house parties and occasionally, and that was about it. Messing around with a 4-track and, recording some demos on cassette, and that was it. But again, it wasn't a career. Nobody had aspirations to send demos to a label or turn this into a full-time job or anything like that. It was just a thing that was happening. And then I joined the band shortly after.
Like a 91, right? Because didn't you sit in for a couple shows and ultimately join full-time then?
That's what happened. Yeah. That was it 90 or 91? Now I can't remember. I think it was the fall of 91 when I started playing with them. And then Jim joined the band, I think the following spring, and was the drummer in our band for years before he exited for a while to play with some other bands that we were friends with, and then came back to our band. We went through a couple of drummers before we landed on Vinnie, who had been a friend of ours in Buffalo, and he was playing in various other bands at the time. And
I was a working stiff. I had a real job out of college, and then but I was playing, like, I was a working drummer in Buffalo, so I was playing 3-4 nights a week, different gig, one of those dudes just gigging all the time. So yeah, and then I joined later. So sorry, back to you, Al.
No, it's okay. I mean, but it was one of those things. You could follow this timeline. It was like, oh, this guy came in here and this guy came in here, and we kind of moved along. I think sort of the real change, I guess, kind of happened. I want to say might have been the summer of 93, and the lineup was just me, Jim, Rob, and Chuck at this point. And we were playing 5 nights a week at this point and touring everywhere from Portland, Maine to probably out into the Midwest, I would say. I don't know how far. We were going out into probably as far as like Bloomington, Indiana, and down to like Charlotte, North Carolina. So that was sort of our territory, playing 5 or 6 nights a week, yet still like we had guys in school. I had a full-time job. Like we were still trying to pull this off while we were doing this, like in our spare time. And then at that point, that was when we decided to take the leap. We're like, you know what? Let's just do this. Let's go full time. And then that was the time when we kind of went for it. And quit jobs, dropped out of school, got a band house, all moved in together. We all pitched in and got a band van, and that was sort of the beginning of the end for us, or the end of the beginning. Or something.
Yeah. And I know that Al, one of the hallmarks of your sound has always been kind of the dueling guitars, you and Chuck. And I know that Chuck had a stroke a couple years ago. How has that impacted the way you guys play, if at all?
A ton. It's not even a year actually. So he had the stroke in November of 21.
Yeah.
So we're just coming up on the first year of it, and we're still contending with it. Chuck is not back and playing with our band currently. So we did one show with a bunch of guest musicians. A bunch of our friends came and showed up, and we did this wonderful show at the Capitol Theater in Port Chester. And then we just sort of tried to figure out what was next. And what we decided ultimately was that we should get out and play some shows and bring in somebody to just be sort of the stable guy in the meantime. It turns out we got 2 guys. So Nate Wilson is playing keyboards, and Suk Cerullo, who's a dear old friend of ours, is playing guitar. He played in a band called Schleho, and he also played with Jim in another band called Lynch, and with Vinny, actually. You guys all played in that band at various times. And Suk is a guitar instructor at the New York Guitar Academy, and I mean, and it's same with Nate. Nate played in Percy Hill and has another band called Ghosts of Jupiter, which is great psych rock band. And both of these guys, I mean, I think Rob put it best. He said, I don't think we have to worry about them when they join the band. He said, because we're going to be like the most incompetent musicians on stage once they join the band. So it's sort of an embarrassment of riches, which is nice to have these guys in the group.
Yeah, and I mean, as we all get older, we find that our peers and friends are going through more frequent health scares. I know that Rob had a cancer scare back in like 17, but he's now cancer free, from what I understand.
That's correct. Yeah. Rob is doing very well and thriving in many ways. He came back, and it took him some time to get reintegrated into playing music. More than anything, he didn't have the endurance to do what we do. I mean, our shows, the show alone is 3.5 to 4 hours. We do 2 sets of music, but prior to that, there's a 2-hour sound check where we pretty much take up that whole time playing 2 hours of music earlier in the day. And as you know, the days can get pretty long. So, if our sound check is at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the show may not end until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you're winding down, etc. So it's a good 12-hour day of being on your feet, playing music, processing everything, talking to a lot of people, etc. And then you do that, then you travel, and then you do it all over again. You do it multiple days a week, and it's like it's just a lot of wear and like it does take some endurance to do it. And but he's gotten to a point where he's sort of back in shape and playing more than ever now, which is great. He's got several side projects that he plays with. He's writing a ton of music, and it's awesome to see. Meanwhile, I'll add that Chuck is well on his way to recovery. I actually went to his house a couple weeks ago, and we played some guitar together, and we have plans to do that again. And he's doing well. And we'll see. We're all very hopeful and optimistic that we're not too far off when we get to that point. We get to start reintegrating him back into the band as well. I know that he would like nothing more at this point.
Right. When you get to a point where you guys have been playing for 30 years, which is honestly remarkable in and of itself, just because bands typically don't last that long. Because, as we've all seen, there's chemistry issues, there's artistic differences, there's wives, there's kids, there's life gets in the way. What has been, when you kind of look back on that legacy of the past 30 years, what do you think has been the key for you guys staying together, but also being still so like well loved by I mean, you have a fan base that is incredibly passionate about what you do. What is the secret to that, to the longevity and just maintaining that relationship with your fans, both inside the band and outside the band, I guess?
Friendship. We still tolerate each other.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to be said about us all, like growing up in upstate New York. Like, we all have the same cultural background. I mean, we're not all Italian or we're not all Irish or whatever, but like, we have this sort of history of, growing up in the same area, listening to the same music, going to college together, hanging out with the same bunch of people. Like, there's this weird sort of thing that we've never really gotten out of. And even though we've all gotten married, we all had our kids around the same time. They all grew up together, not in the same town, but like same, and it's the people, our fans, they call themselves family. It really truly is family in a lot of ways, that we're all one big family, and that the fans have been included in that. And I think that has a lot to do with it. It's not all of it, but there's a big part of it that is it's just this big family that has been together and stuck together.
I agree. I think the common background thing is definitely prevalent, and must lend itself to some piece of it. There's all these other aspects of it too. Like, we all come from similar backgrounds, as Vinny said, but we're also all like the youngest in our families, the youngest boys. And so we have that too. At one point, everybody, like all of the band and everyone in our crew, we were all like the youngest boys, and we were all together, and it was like Lord of the Flies on the road. And I mean, but it was great. Like, there's definitely this thing where we all like this. Everybody's fairly down to earth, and we definitely have a good sense of looking out for one another. And
the only child that we ever had, I think, got fired. Only child syndrome does not work well in the Moe's situation.
Yeah.
And we've been fortunate that like all the other sort of trappings of being in a band, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll part of it, like, haven't been a negative influence on us. If anything, like, we get to enjoy those indulgences from time to time, like when we're hanging out, but like not like have it be a distraction to us about, like, again, like the things that are important to us. And so like nothing's ever gotten in the way of like us just being focused on like being a band. And like, we've also never been burdened with being too big or having a hit or being too successful. It's really been a very slow like evolution for us, and it's kept us pretty freaking grounded the whole time.
So after 30 years, how do you look forward? What do you say? How do you look forward in terms of what's next and getting excited about what lies ahead?
I mean, I just enjoy playing so much at this point, and the fact that we've been through so much together, and with Rob having cancer and then Chuck with his stroke, it's just like every chance we get to be on stage together, because we communicate so well together and we get to open up, and it's our music. So it's not like, it's one thing to go and be on stage and just play cover music and it's like, oh, hey, that was great, whatever. When you can do that with your own music, and it's that, like, you have that connection and you play it that well, and you take yourself and fans to that place, it's just freaking amazing to do, and it's fun, and it's like, for me now, any day that I get to do it is awesome, because, you never know when it's going to not be able, you're not going to be able to do it because someone has a stroke or someone, has cancer or whatever it is. So I just look forward to every day being a blessing that we get to do this.
I'd agree. And we've gotten, it's more than 30 years at this point, and we've gotten over like not only all the big things, I mean, not that we've gotten over all of them. I mean, I hope we don't have more trauma to deal with, or tragedies or whatever, but like we've dealt with so much little shit that none of it matters anymore, and the way we all interact with one another is so great at this point. The last record that we made together, like I always think back to this, which is pre-pandemic. We all, when I say this, the band all rented a house together outside of Burlington. So we stayed in an Airbnb together for about a month. And so we all lived together in this house for a month, and then we would commute daily to the studio and then work in the studio all day long and then go back to the house and make dinner and whatever and hang out. We did that for a month straight. I don't think there was a single disagreement in the entire month. And we're making a record, which can be a pretty tense situation, and we're living together for a month straight, and it was great. Like, I mean, it was it was such an enjoyable time, and I look back on it, and I'm glad that I got to do it with these guys.
Yeah.
Is it kind of nice that in today's economics of the industry, with honestly the revenue that used to flow out of record making is not really an issue anymore, and you really just, because Vinny, to go back to your point about you'd love to being able to be on stage with the guys, is it nice that like that is the emphasis, in that you're just playing on stage and you don't have to worry about going to the studio and cranking out? I mean, whether you want to or not, you don't have to worry about it as a way just to make a living anymore. Instead, the focus is kind of on touring, which, there's touring has also always been a huge component of it, but the revenue historically, especially when you guys started, was still tied to record making, and now it's really not. I mean, I would see that as almost a benefit in terms of like taking a weight off your shoulders.
It does. The interesting component to that, I guess, the interesting aspect is that not a whole lot has changed for us.
Yeah.
Touring has always been the focus of what we do. Playing live music has always been our number one priority, going back to the early 90s. So, and all the releases we did early on were independent. We did everything ourselves, released it ourselves, distributed it ourselves. And then ultimately we got signed and we had a major label deal, and we thought, oh, well, now this is going to change everything, because that was made it. And it was like mid 90s, and it was like right at the time when jam bands had songs on the radio. So we thought, oh, well, I mean, anything's possible at this point. If they're playing the Spin Doctors and Blues Traveler and Dave Matthews, and they all had hits on the radio, like we could and we wrote songs like that. There's no reason, like we could write a good rock song that could get played on the radio. Didn't happen, obviously, but
we wrote plenty of good rock songs,
right. And we just didn't have maybe we didn't have the right song, maybe we didn't have the right, who knows,
people.
We didn't have the right, it was the timing, all the things that happened in the music industry. And so we just carried on doing what we do. Then we went back to sort of making our own records and, various distribution deals, etc. along the way. We've just been a live touring band the entire time. Yeah. And as you said, like the recording industry or the record industry part of it has kind of fallen away. And now the whole industry has come around to this live touring model. We've been doing it for 30 years. And it's like, we don't have to figure that out. We don't need to figure out how to turn like your live recordings into a thing, or how to make like merch or touring or whatever, like how to perfect all of that or tour all of the time. Like we just do that. That is our business model.
Yeah. I mean, the Dead didn't have a song played on radio until Touch of Grey in around 1990, and really didn't have much played on radio after that, and they've never needed it anyhow. So
that was it.
And they're bigger now than
almost
ever.
A one-hit wonder.
Yeah. It was always more about trading cassette tapes with those guys. It's being people of our age, we can, I'm sure, remember that when cassette tapes from their live shows, were like gold.
It's kind of how we got across the country in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
We allowed taping at the shows, and our tapes started actually becoming fillers on Dead and Phish tapes. That spread the word. So tapers would start showing up at Mo shows, and then they record whole Mo shows and be like, you got to hear this. And then, by the time we made our way to California, our first run of shows in California, Great American Music Hall, the Troubadour, and we played somewhere else, all sold out first time. So, and that was, due to tapes mostly, I would say, and the scene, the burgeoning jam band scene. But, it was, that whole scene was kind of happened because of the tapes and the Dead, and then the post Dead, Phish and ARU and the bands that were starting to come out then, String Cheese and Widespread and all that. So
it wasn't like Rerun on that episode of What's Happening where he illegally taped the Doobie Brothers and then got in trouble for it.
Right.
For those of us who have ever seen What's Happening.
But
yes,
really dating.
Love that show.
Yeah. Al and Vinnie from Mo. Guys, this has been great having you on the show. What's next? What should your fans be looking out for from you that we can let them know about?
We have more touring, doing what we do. We have more tour dates coming out. We also
tuned to your website.
That's right. We also have a podcast of our own that we've been doing called the Pod Crash. And it's something that we release bi-weekly, and it's literally just the band hanging out and having a casual conversation. So we'll continue to do that. And, we're looking forward to 23 and all that may bring, and doing more and more of what we do.
Awesome, guys.
We do have, it's a little limited in the touring for the rest of the year just because of Chuck and, not wanting to kind of overdo it without him. So we are limited in the number of shows to, I don't know, 10 or 12 or 15 or whatever it is. So, people should go grab their tickets for whatever shows in their region, because they're few and far between now. And then we're hoping that come 2023, we'll just be back to full capacity.
Right on, guys. Well, hey, best of luck to you. Best of health to everyone in the band. Al, thank you for the gun show, because guns out. And all right, Mo, thank you so much for being on the Loadout. It's really been it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you on, and really, really enjoyed talking to you both.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.